Well, that's 5 for 5 so far. As of every single Living World release, the devs have taken to Reddit to do a big company-wide Ask Me Anything where the fans get to interact with them and have a bit of back and forth. This is really, under Mo as the game director, our best opportunity as a community to get information from the developers. I still think that they're doing this a little bit too quickly after the release. I mean, most of us don't have the time to play the map, get meaningful feedback, have interesting questions, experience the story, and then get to Reddit while it's still going on. They're doing the AMAs too fast, but hey, they're at least happening, and so I took the time, guys, as I did with all the other AMAs, to have a read through, pick out the interesting comments from my perspective, and give you guys that information. If you want to read the thread itself, it's obviously over thousands of comments long, and there'll be a link to that in the description. So sit back, enjoy. We'll see what the devs have been saying about the most recent release, some answers to big questions, some of the hot topics, stuff like legendary armor, and we'll see how we go. If you're going to watch the footage as well, not only will you get to see the stuff on screen, but I guess I'll be running around on the new map. There shouldn't be any spoilers, and indeed, every time that the story stuff came up in this AMA, just like I did last release, I'll be putting those to the side until later. But you will see me running around the map on a giant-ass warrior as well, a big Norn using the embiggening tonic, who looks awesome. All right, so let's start out. First, we have the game director himself, with a couple of big opening statements, and these are really huge. I mentioned in a recent video that it feels like Guild Wars 2's kind of gone into a different phase now, and it's all because Flashpoint, the 5th episode, has been confirmed to be the penultimate release. We are expecting an expansion, and perhaps a lot sooner than many of us were thinking, myself included. It was only very recently that I started to warm to the idea of an expansion so soon, and well, now we really have to face the reality that that's happening, and that's opened the door for a lot of interesting questions. So, let's see what Mo says on his opening statement. He says this: "We announced that today's episode, Flashpoint, is the second to last episode of the season. So yes, that means what you think it means. There's one more episode after this, and then we're going straight into the expansion pack. A lot of you have been wondering about the upcoming release cadence, given that the last time around we took a long break from Living World releases to get to Heart of Thorns out the door, and then to support that expansion after release." So let me just stop there, right? This first paragraph, this is Mike, roundabout, acknowledging the content droughts, and acknowledging that, hey, this was probably too long of a period, that golden, beautiful dream of an expac coming, getting a load of new people into the game, and then immediately rolling into Living World that captures them, that they'd missed it. And this is really kind of cool to see them be so upfront about it. So he says this of the next expansion: "The good news is that this time around, we have two separate, fully staffed teams that are both hitting on all cylinders. So our rough plan is to slot the expansion pack into the release cadence as if it were an episode. We'll have episode 5, then 6, then an expansion pack, then episode 1. But we'll make some allowance for the fact that shipping the expansion pack is a big deal logistically and will probably take longer than the 2 to 3 months we normally allocate between episodes." This is so cool, guys. This is enormous. This is so brilliant. It's kind of sad in a lot of ways because this is what I thought ArenaNet were doing and should have been doing way back in 2012. In fact, I remember a blog post way back when they actually suggested as much, and that obviously never happened. This is, as bluntly as you're ever gonna get it, confirmation that they've had the two sides working in tandem, and we shouldn't have any content droughts. That's what the big takeaway is here, guys, and that is so good. Imagine, right, that you get a new friend of yours into the game, they get hooked on the expansion itself, and then they have meaningful, quick, rapid-fire content rolling in straight away. That probably does mean that the guys that made Lake Doric are working on Season 4 right now. They're working on maps in totally different regions of the world based on story in totally different regions of the world. It's crazy to think about. Very, very, very cool, and I'm really, really happy to hear him as bluntly as possible explain that. So how long are we going to be waiting after episode 6 for the expansion? He says they're going to allow more than 2 to 3 months. I'm guessing maybe 4 or 5 months, perhaps half a year at max, but even that won't feel too badly as long as we have current events coming in. And you've got to consider this is all expansion hype. That period of time, they're going to be bombarding us with betas and information about all the elite specializations, and the streams probably will be picking up majorly. In a lot of ways, the pre-Heart of Thorns content drought was bad, but at least there was something majorly exciting for the community to rally around, and it meant a lot of us were playing the game just kind of in preparation of Heart of Thorns coming out. And so even even if it is a little bit longer, I think it will probably fly by. So I think this is great, and especially the thought that this new expansion's coming out, and then we'll be in episode 1 again very soon. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant, and so that was that put a big smile on my face as the first thing to see on this AMA here. He also confirmed, by the way, in a follow-up comment that expansion news will specifically be coming after episode 6. We're not going to be getting expansion news before episode 6. It will be after, and then they'll kind of move into that phase, which makes a lot of sense. But so this does continue to raise questions, right? Like legendary weapons. This most recent patch only gave us 1 legendary weapon, and there's still a fair few that we don't have, but people paid for with Heart of Thorns. And we're going to be in another expansion, and they're not all going to have been delivered on, right? So Mo does talk about this, and this is pretty interesting. He says, our plan is to keep releasing legendary weapons alongside episodes. So we're not going to have legendaries coming outside of episodes like in current events. It will be with episodes, and with the new weapons not requiring the new expansion. So this is really weird. What it means is that you don't need to buy the next expansion to get access to legendary weapons that will be dropped in with episodes in season 4, which presumably will be tied to the next expansion nonetheless. Wow, it's really weird. If you think about it, it's kind of like Heart of Thorns is still releasing while Expansion 2 will be releasing, and there's just all these odd things to think about. Honestly, I would have expected a bigger backlash to this than there seems to have been, but people have just kind of accepted that as the thing, and we're kind of moving with it. What do you guys think about that? It's so weird and bizarre. But it also means that Expansion 2 will not have legendary weapons as like a marketable feature of it. If you think about the Heart of Thorns big website, it had like new legendary weapons on there. They're not selling new legendary weapons in this next expansion. If we get more for sale as a part of an expansion, I guess it won't be X-Pack 2, but it'll be X-Pack 3, which is like way off in the future. So weird stuff, like they're leapfrogging, but I guess I can kind of wrap my head around it. So yeah. Moving on, we had another big comment from Mo as well, and this wasn't just about the fact that another expansion's coming, but actually in a roundabout way, he was talking about the leaks, something I did a dedicated video on earlier this week, and he actually said something not so much to do with the leaks, but to do with marketing the game here that I really liked, and I think we could do well to listen to. So let's see what he says here. He says, I hope you're all enjoying the big reveal today, and that is the big reveal in episode 5, so he's talking about the story. He says, some of you are looking for more reveals today, reading anything you can find about the next expansion pack. And so here he's alluding to the leaks without actually pointing at them explicitly, which is good because that way he doesn't sort of fan the flames. He says, I'm glad you're so excited about what is coming, but keep in mind that you have the potential to spoil yourself pretty hard. Spoilers take away the delightful surprises from upcoming announcements and releases, and more important, they also take away the reveals that you'd otherwise get to experience fresh as you play through the content. If you want to spoil yourself to open all your presents early, that's a choice you make for yourself, but do me a favor and don't make it for other people. Things can quickly become common knowledge around map chat, guild chat, Reddit, etc., and then it gets to the point where no one gets to be surprised and delighted as they play through the game. And after all, games are meant to be played. So there's a whole big discussion here on whether we should leak things. I think people think that I'm very firmly in the anti-leak territory because of the video I did. That wasn't quite the point of the video I did. The video I did was kind of explaining that I will eventually be talking about the leaks. But all that stuff aside, Mike goes on and he says, while we're talking, there's another thing I'll ask for your help with. He says, you love the game. Then get the word out. Not just today with the release of episode 5, but whenever there are things to talk about. I know many of you look to us to keep the game's player base strong through paid advertising, but there's only so much that paid advertising can do for Guild Wars 2 in 2017 when most people made their buy or don't buy decision back in 2012. What brings new players to an older game isn't the advertising, but the buzz, the excitement, the press coverage, the word of mouth. And specifically, that buzz has to happen in the places where people who aren't already playing the game are hanging out. If you only talk about the game in our Guild Wars 2, and if you use our Guild Wars 2 to spread leaks and rumors, thus muting our ability to make news elsewhere when we make announcements, you make it tough for us to keep reaching new players. But you've shown as a community that you can be great evangelists for the game when you want to be. I hope you'll rally together to help us get the word out on days like today when there's a big release, and of course when we reveal the next expansion pack, even if by then it feels like old news to some of you, winky face. So I really liked this comment. It felt very real, it felt very grounded, and I think most importantly, what he's trying to say is a big deal for Guild Wars 2. Like, it's an MMO that has continued having updates, great updates, and I think is worthy of a lot of word-of-mouth advertising. It's a game, in my opinion, that is worthy of us saying to our family members and our friends from other games, hey, do you want to play this, right? It's worthy of word-of-mouth marketing. But the thing is, it's kind of tainted by the fact it came out in 2012, and this is an unfortunate thing about all MMOs, really, and all frequently updated games. So this is a bit of encouragement from Mike to get us to talk to other people in our social circles about the game, get that word of mouth going, because it is going to be, in a lot of ways, one of the most powerful ways that Guild Wars 2 continues to grow. Now, you might take this as kind of tacky to ask the audience to do this. You might take it as, you know, he's basically asking us all to become shields for the game if you are so inclined. But I think that the fundamental thing he's trying to get at there is quite worthy and quite important to think about. The game can grow a lot, but in a lot of ways, it's relying on us to grow it for ourselves. And we'll see whether that encourages, you know, more people to talk about the game, especially when the next expansion comes out, and we'll see how much it can continue growing. It's a weird thing, right? Like, what about in another 5 years where the game seems even older? What about another 5 after that? Even if there aren't engine things holding it back, there's always going to be that weird taint of, hey, all those years ago someone decided not to play, and it can be hard to break through that. Anyway, moving on. Let's get into some of the other comments, not the top level stuff. Let's move on to what the other devs are talking about. There was a message immediately from Arena John, who once again is talking about the Mac client. Very good updates, every single AMA on this. This time we get it in the form of a haiku, which is spring arrives for Mac, testers test on alpha builds, coming soon to you. Okay, so basically it seems we're going to be able to test the Mac client very, very, very soon. Also, a little bit later, a more tangible message that apparently it's a 64-bit client, so performance is very promising on it, and that they are determining the minimum system requirements right now for the Mac client. So that's great. Obviously, I don't use a Mac, but I know there are a lot of people out there, and it would be kind of cool if the next expansion coincides with a Mac release. I don't know, that might help them tap into another big bit of audience that they couldn't before. Moving on, we got a message about World versus World generally. There's kind of one message about World versus World that meant anything, and one message about PvP that really meant anything. The World versus World one was this. When asked what they're prioritizing, what they're doing, the response says that we like skirmishes and we are looking to support this with rewards in the future. In general, for World versus World, the priorities are rewards and ascended equipment. It's funny because, you know, all this talk about the expansion, I think some people are like, well, what's happening with the expansion? Are we getting another Borderlands? Are they doing another overhaul? Whatever. World vs. World devs have really taken that course of they don't talk very much. We know that they don't talk very much. All these walls of text get thrown at them in these AMAs, and this is what you get. So rewards are something that World vs. Worlders care about. Ascended gear is stuff that World vs. Worlders care about. Is it enough? Well, that's not for me to say as someone who doesn't really play the game type very much. We'll get to PvP soon enough. Oh, it was also mentioned elsewhere, by the way, that those changes will be coming this year for World vs. World, which is nice, but they got, obviously, a long way to still hit that deadline, shall we say. Moving on, we got a thing about the new mastery. Kind of cool. So apparently the mastery was something originally that was just going to be a part of a task in episode 2. So, you know how we had to save the script from the lava, and we had to, you know, destroy Massart fortifications and stuff, those renown hearts. Apparently one of them was originally going to have this grapple hook thing. I wonder what one it was going to be. Possibly the one near the circus. But they said that they loved it so much that they decided to take it out of the heart and hold on to it so they could really do it justice as a full-fledged mastery, and they ended up building an entire damn map around this, and it is a cool mastery. It is very, very, very badass. We'll talk more about that soon. There were quite a lot of dev comments about that mastery. Moving on, the new map, Draconis Mons. I love the new map, and I love that I can look people in the eye and I can honestly say, this map is a full-size map. This map is huge. This map is way bigger than anything else they've ever dropped into the game through Living World. It's massive. You should check it out. I love that I can say that to people, and it is because it's so enormous. It's pretty beautiful as well. But so they were asked, was it supposed to be so big? The response, therefore, is apparently that the map definitely ended up bigger than they were initially expecting. So I guess they, on the outside, they actually decided, oh yeah, we're going to make a normal size map akin to Bloodstone Fen or whatever, and then it ended up way bigger. The original design called for 4 big islands of content that were arranged in cardinal directions to help with navigation. So you'd have like a big northern island, I guess, a southern, western, eastern. And they go on to say that it was also going to have a little bit of connecting terrain between those big islands. As they worked on it though, the map grew to become more and more layered. Still, they're pretty happy with the end result. Funny to see how that had adapted, because you really can't describe Draconis Mons as that original idea these days, but I love it. I think it's a brilliant map, and it's probably the most fun implementation of verticality in map design I think they've done in Guild Wars 2 so far, including Tangled Depths, which is something I actually really liked. Moving on, here's our little PvP comment. They say that for PvP, right now, their priorities are these. We are working on a solution to further support competitive modes within the game. We do like the idea of Guild Wars 1's automated tournaments and are drawing inspiration from that. We'll have more on this as we get closer to releasing any changes or additions. It's curious to me that they say they're drawing inspiration from the automated tournaments rather than just saying, yeah, we're doing automated tournaments. Suggests that it will be slightly different in some way, hopefully an improvement. Does anybody who's really familiar with the Guild Wars 1 automated tournaments want to chip in on that in the comments? Like, how would you improve on that so much that maybe it will come under a totally different title? But yeah, automated tournaments, it's good that they like those. I hope we see more. And I wonder why that's listed kind of separately as a solution to further support competitive modes. What do they mean, competitive modes? Are we looking at Stronghold? Is Stronghold going to find some redemption at some point? Oh, doing the Heart of Thorns review and talking about that recently really reminds me how sad it is, the state of Stronghold right now. I think that that game type really did have some potential. They just kind of squandered it. Moving on, we got some stuff on Legendary Armor, of which there was a lot. I haven't picked too much for this video here, but obviously Legendary Armor can rune swap. The question is, will we allow that for sigils on weapons, Legendary weapons? And this is a pretty interesting thing to go into, because there are a lot more Legendary weapons than there is Legendary Armor, and sigils kind of are balanced quite differently in the economy. I know they feel the similar as upgrades, but sigils are kind of one and done situations rather than runes, where you need 6 times as many of those items, right? And they kind of function a little bit differently on the trading post. And so this was the devs' answer as to whether we'll get sigil swapping. And the answer is basically no. But they say this: we had originally intended that you should also be able to change the sigils in the same way as runes for armor. So we had thought of it for everyone out there who thought we forgot. However, when we started our economic impact analysis, it became clear that we needed to do a deeper investigation to assess potential risks and not previously foreseen. The investigation is currently ongoing. So I take this as a no. Maybe that's wrong of me. Maybe that's a bit cynical of me. But and I wonder what the economic impact analysis actually revolves around. There were people questioning this in the comments underneath, obviously, because everyone wants all the quality of life and freedom that they can have. I do think that, obviously, I don't want to see a Guild Wars 2 where all the sigils and all the runes in the game are worth nothing and suddenly all these rewards just feel hollow and crappy. I don't want to live in that world of Guild Wars 2, but we'll have to see what they come out with eventually. But I kind of take this as a no, even though they say the investigation is currently ongoing. It's a no for now. Let's leave it there. Funny thing, this is probably one of the only times I'm going to do this on this video. This is not a dev response, but I like to see it. The 5th time now in a row, reminder, hey, where are the revenant weapons from the Heart of Thorns betas, or even alphas, shall we say? Can we please get those? Except this time there was not actually a response. Usually the devs respond and say, oh yeah, we'll find it, we'll put them in, it's cool, we'll do it. Nobody even responded this time, so, I mean, is it really going to be gone forever? Are we finally going to get these when we find out what happened to Ritlock in the Mists or something? Or is it, what could be so hard? They're previewable in-game. Come on. Moving on. We had a comment on festivals. So I find this very interesting, and for several reasons. So this is what they say about festivals and the current events team specifically. Festivals. Over the past year, the team has been focused on streamlining the work we do each year to turn festivals on and off. A big step forward occurred with the Super Adventure Festival, which activated and deactivated without even needing a build. I can't promise what the future will hold, as we also work on current events and other content, but my personal hope is that festivals will be something to look forward to, smiley face. And further as well, a little bit lower down, we have another message here. The existing tradition is that map art has been manually swapped out and then changed back each year. With the Super Adventure Festival this year, we made some use of new tech from guild halls to set the SAB decorations up as a toggleable overlay on the map. When the time comes, the overlay art activates and gracefully fades in. A word of cautions though, the Super Adventure Town art is very minor compared to the dramatic redecorations of a festival like Halloween, so it's possible that we'll need a different plan there, or need to do on-off builds a few more times, etc. So this is really cool to me. I think what they're essentially saying is, you know how in a guild hall they now have the tech to, you know, manifest assets, boom, right then and there in the middle of the map, like when someone places a decoration. They're kind of saying they're doing that same thing, but in the open world maps. And it's also, I guess, a bit similar to when you've got maps like Auric Basin, where if the meta event succeeds, the doors open and then all of these chests manifest, versus if it doesn't succeed, the doors stay shut and the chests don't manifest. And so it doesn't require a build to do these kind of big dramatic changes to the environment. And so, yeah, that's kind of cool to think about, that they'll just flick it on and off. Why this is also interesting to me is this has been such a long thing for Guild Wars. I remember, again, way back when the first Halloween came out, when the first Winter's Day came out, that they were talking about that they wanted these things to be able to turn on and off really easily, that they wouldn't need that much development focus, and it's still a thing that they're looking at. Still, here in 2017, they're still looking at, okay, how can we streamline the festivals more and more and more and more and more? So, hopefully next year, we'll see that the current events team are freed up to do even more current events now, and that to do even more changes to festivals, and they kind of are suggesting a little bit that there'll be something to look forward to with them. But I mean, are we at the end of the road of streamlining festival stuff? You guys have got the dev comment there. You can decide for yourselves. Moving back to Draconis Mons, here we have a little bit more talk about the mastery, which of course you can use in guild halls right now, which is really cool. So someone says, hey, are we going to get this elsewhere, like in core tier areas, kind of like how we had core tier gliding, right? And they say that it's very unlikely we'll include the new mastery in lots of other maps, but it's not an impossibility. So this could even include the final map from season 3, right, in episode 6. They say it's not an impossibility. It is relatively easy to add Oakheart's essence nodes wherever the hell they want, but the big cost is in making sure that the grappling hook mechanic doesn't break any map that it's included in. Draconis Mons was a map that was built specifically with that mastery in mind, and that makes sense, right? Like, you could drop it in Queensdale, right at the entrance of Shaymore. Someone could pick it up, and then they could theoretically use it, they could waypoint to, you know, God's Lost Swamp, and then use it to climb out of the map or something in a way that the devs don't like, or bug themselves above the Divinity's Reach dams or something. So, and whether they're going to go to the effort of, you know, meticulously checking every little area of every map, make sure that all the invisible walls are in place and stuff, is it really going to be worth it? I don't know. I hope it's in episode 6, though. I do hope it's in episode 6, because if this is a mastery for the ancient magics that we only get in one place ever, that would kind of suck. I think the mastery should be a little bit more expansive than a single map thing, right? Because then there's the question of, why did they make this a mastery instead of just have it sell at a vendor, kind of like they did in Bloodstone Fen with those glider skills? There's just more signs that the mastery system itself has got some real problems. Anyway, moving on. There's a little thing from the Fractals devs. This really isn't news, but I love the Fractals devs. So they chip in to say that they can't talk about what's coming. If you guys remember on the last update, we actually heard that they had a new Fractal entirely that was nearly ready, and they've talked for a while about a revamp as well that was nearly ready. I really thought that this episode was gonna have a new Fractal. Like last release, episode 4, we get the episode and we get a raid, and then maybe this one we would get the episode and a Fractal, and that would be a really nice leapfrog. For whatever reasons, it seems that they didn't manage to get that, and they were very, very tight-lipped, though they were all over the thread, so that was kind of cool. Moving on. How many Guild Wars 2 developers played the original? Maybe not too interesting in terms of Guild Wars 2 news. Interesting to me, though, because we're seeing a lot of GW1 lore and GW1 references and stuff pop up in full force, really, ever since Season 3 started, when the Massart came back into it and so forth. And I have been curious about that. How many of the people who are making this game did play the original? And so the response we get is that quite a goodly number. I can start rattling off names of people who not only played it, but worked on it, but suffice it to say, many have done one or both. And specifically, Lindsay Murdoch says that she's got over 5,000 hours in Guild Wars 1, had about 2,000 when they got their job there 11 years ago. I got my foot in the door because I was a super fan. Most of the folks that worked on Guild Wars Beyond with me still work here, and I interact with them almost daily. We love this franchise. I love that a lot of the Guild Wars Beyond people are still there, because Guild Wars Beyond and what that group of people were doing was when I first became like a big super geek for Guild Wars. Like, I'd played it for years, but when I first started watching the news and stuff, it was the Guild Wars Beyond days. And so I like to hear that those guys are still there, you know? Moving on, there was another question about Draconis Mons, and the response here kind of disappointed me. So the question is, why did they call it Draconis Mons, which is Latin? So the response is this, that the map was originally named Mantle Rock Scald, but we thought it was unrealistic that such a big mountain wouldn't have a name like Mount Everest or Mount Rainier. We took inspiration from Olympus Mons, the largest volcano on Mars. Adding Draconis to the name was a short leap from there. There are actually a lot of responses to this from the devs. I'll leave it there though. Now, I'm a big fan of Mars. That's a weird thing to say, but I've done a lot of like research into Mars in the past. I think Mars is fascinating. And Olympus Mons, of course, is the tallest mountain or volcano in the entire solar system, and it's badass, right? But as much as I like that, I had a much cooler theory as to why they named it in Latin. And I guess this is a place where I'm attributing genius and intelligence where I shouldn't. I thought that the new map was named Latin because this was the location that the Titans burst out into Tyria, or near enough to it, and the Titans themselves all had Latin names. And so I thought it was some kind of callback to the fact that the Titans were in this area once upon a time, and I thought it was that lore reason, and I thought that was great, but from all these messages that the devs have left here, it seems it didn't even occur to any of them, and I was just, you know, going down the rabbit hole, and I probably shouldn't have. Silly me. And so we're really deep into the dev comments here. There's a bit of a bombshell, and it's got very few upvotes, criminally few upvotes, actually. This is very big, and I actually think this is going to really upset a lot of people, but there was a dev comment that, well, probably one of the most important ones in this entire thread. So the devs were asked, hey, are you going to make new sets of legendary armor? And I think that's a reasonable thing to ask of ArenaNet, and I think that's a reasonable thing to think that Guild Wars 2 should have, especially when you look at the back pieces. If there was a back piece for PvP and a back piece for PvE, and hopefully one day there'll be a back piece for World vs. World, why the hell should legendary armor only be a PvE thing? Why don't the PvPers get a legendary armor set? Why don't the World vs. Worlders get a legendary armor set? Or beyond that, shouldn't there just be more legendary armor sets that look different, just like how we have multiple different legendary weapons to choose from and they continue updating legendary weapons in the game? Shouldn't this be something they are looking to expand? Shouldn't this be a pillar of Guild Wars 2 for years and years and years to come? Are we really just going to get one set of legendary armor and that's it? Well, the answer is this. There are no future plans for any legendary armor sets. Full stop. Wow, I guess that doesn't mean never, never, never. And I'm sure that the devs were always scared to say stuff like this. This is why we always hear, oh, it's on the table. We'll hear maybe at some point. I'm sure this is not a never, ever comment, but it's sad to think that right now there is absolutely nothing that they're thinking about, even for the next expansion. Or maybe it is an idea for the next expansion, but they're not talking about it until episode 6, and so it's not a big deal. But yeah, no plans, not for the Heart of Thorns days at least. And I mean, we're coming into the twilight years of the Heart of Thorns days anyway. But what do you guys think about that? No more legendary armor sets. I'm a raider, and so I've already got my set of legendary armor. So this obviously doesn't upset me as much as other people, but I can sympathize with you. I can empathize with you if you're in that situation. Absolutely. Moving on, we've got another question about the mastery. People really liked this. So how did you make it? How did it work out? The devs say this: the biggest challenge was deciding how, if at all, to limit this mastery. The harsher the limitations, the more likely it was to be included in other maps, but the less fun or intuitive it became. The first iteration was a timed buff, but had unlimited charges. After that, it had unlimited duration, but only a single charge. We also tried a distance-based system, where you could fire the grappling hook wherever you were near an Oakheart's Essence node. There were pros and cons to each of these attempts, but ultimately we liked the 3-charge version the best. The other biggest hurdle was getting the character animations and effects to look smooth and polished. As one example, originally if you fired Oakheart's reach while gliding, the glider would briefly tilt to the side as the character's arm reached forwards. I just thought that was interesting to see how they balance it, and it's interesting to think of that seesaw, right, of, yeah, the more interesting they make it, the less chance you'll ever see it's going to be anywhere else. Moving on, we've got an interesting comment about rewards on the new maps. So I'll read the person's question first. They say, I want to know more about the Blood Ruby items. And if you guys recall, these are the items that you get from Bloodstone Fen that you can actually stat swap as ascended trinkets, remember? Now, they say, I don't know if more were added this patch, if it was unintentional to have them be pseudo-legendaries, like stat reselectable, and whether or not there is any plans on completing the set as of now that we have an emblem, a ring, and a back, and wondering if we would see new items, such as another ring and 2 accessories, that would do the same thing. So, really weirdly worded here, but the person's basically asking, are we going to get more of these pseudo-legendary things? And so the dev response is, we've discussed trying to add the same functionality for other Living World jewelry. I can't promise anything, but it's something that we're looking at. Now, I find this very interesting, because earlier in the AMA as well, we hear that they haven't forgotten about the Junlei Electrum Ingot, which is an ascended item that got put into the bank a long time ago, but has never been accessible. It's supposedly crafted with silver, gold, and mithril, I think it was, or maybe platinum. It's a sink, and it seems to be for those different types of ores, and seemed to originally have had something to do with 500 jewel crafting, but 500 jewelry obviously hasn't been a thing. So I wonder what's going on here. I wonder whether the Junlei Electrum ingots are finally going to have a use, and it's going to be in stat swapping this stuff. And because I think it's the same dev that responded to both. So that's my theory. That's what I think they're going for. Maybe the next expansion is not going to have a new discipline, but it'll have 500 jewel smithing in it or something like that. But yeah, so that's a little bit of between the lines stuff, conspiracy theory that I've been looking at. And so now we're really coming towards the end here, guys. Just a couple of other really small little dev comments here before we're done. I found it interesting. The devs did confirm, as much as people really detest a lot of the medium legendary armor, one of the big problems with it is if you're a char, your tail clips through the trench coat, and they say they are gonna fix that. So there will be a redesign for the medium legendary armor, specifically with regard to char tails, which won't clip through it. And that's one of the big problems with it that thankfully they're gonna be looking at. And then another comment that sadly beyond that, they have no more changes planned at all for the legendary armor. And there you go, guys. That's the main stuff that I picked out of the AMA. Still pretty big, still pretty meaty. We always end up talking about half an hour on here. If I missed any, I'd love to hear down below in the comments. Obviously, tons of different topics, huge different range of things to talk about here. But that's the AMA for Flashpoint. I will see you guys next time, where I'll show you crafting the legendary armor myself in a bit of a fluffy video. We'll be talking about the story. We've got the jumping puzzle to show off. Still plenty more things going on. I know you're all very keen on hearing about the story, but of course, these are big patches, and we've got lots of other stuff to talk about too. Thanks very much for watching, guys. Thanks for supporting the channel, and I will see you very shortly. Catch you next time, everybody.